There's an infinite opportunity to see something, be something new. You just have to be in the right place. Kutztown University, where you won't just get accepted, you'll belong. Visit www.kutztown.edu/roar for more information.
So today, I thought that since it's the beginning of December, it's kind of the happy holidays type of time kind of deal. You're always hearing the happy holidays. But it was also brought to my attention that maybe right now is not always a happy time for the holidays for people, specifically people that identify as LGBTQ. Sometimes the holidays are not easy to talk about and not easy to go home to, and not everyone has a family to go home to during this time. So I thought that we would make it a holiday edition of Tough Topics. And so we're going to talk about kind of what that actually looks like. Because with me today, I have someone that has a very powerful story about their family and kind of what that can look like in the actual community and things like that. So just kind of to bring it into a more concrete place, I do want to throw out a statistic just so that way you kind of understand, that this is something that really does happen, is that according to the Human Rights Campaign, 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. And so that's almost half of the homeless population is identifying as LGBTQ. So, and that's the reason why I wanted to throw that out there, is just because that is that's a definite population that isn't going home for the holidays and doesn't have a family to kind of go celebrate with and feel that support from and things like that. So, when I came up with this idea or this show topic, I really wanted to pick someone that I knew was going to actually be able to speak to an experience and kind of put that information out there for people to kind of get a better sense of what this can look like. So, what comes up for you, Alyssa, for, this time of year, the holidays, and going home?
Historically, it's been a mixed feeling. I was raised in a Muslim household. The closest thing that we have to Christmas or Hanukkah in terms of large-scale celebration and family get-togethers, that kind of thing, is Eid al-Fitr, which comes after the month of Ramadan. Since that's based on the lunar calendar, it moves throughout our calendar's year, and so it's very rare that it falls in the wintertime. And my parents were fairly strict Muslims, which meant that we didn't engage in any, we didn't celebrate anything close to Christmas or Hanukkah. We Muslims recognize Jesus as a prophet, so we would, go to a prayer sermon at some point during December, but, nothing like gifts, nothing like parties. We didn't do Christmas trees, we didn't do lights, we didn't do anything like that. For me, because of all this, it became a sort of a mixed sense of relaxation and dread in the days coming up to it, because I was an honor student all through high school. I was under a lot of stress, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to take a few weeks and just ease up and relax and not have to worry about schoolwork. Unfortunately, that also came with the reality that once I got home, I was cut off from my friends, from my school, from anyone I could really talk to in person for 2 to 3 weeks. Typically was how long my winter break was. So it was very much a mixed feeling. I felt that mix of relaxation and joy that I'm going to be out of school, I don't have to worry about anything. And then there's also that sense of dread that, I'm going to be stuck in a not very healthy family environment for 3 weeks with basically no help.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you actually mentioned the religion that you're raised in, because I 100% completely forgot that you possibly don't even celebrate Christmas. And so that was just me being silly on that end. But I'm sure that, going to a public school, you went to public school, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sure that going to a public school that probably does a lot of Christmas activities and, kind of celebrates that culture and that kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Where it's the main celebrated the majority, I guess. I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
With that being the majority, and then going home or having your parents kind of try to like push that under the rug, that would totally create a different experience, which I didn't even think about that. So I'm glad you shared that with me.
Yeah.
What was it like? What was that relationship like? Like, where did that dread come from?
The dread came from a number of different places. You mentioning like my public school experience, that's one place I guess I'd start with. It was a hollow, sort of like depressing feeling where like this is like it's gonna be dark, it's gonna be cold, and like while all of my friends are going to be like having family and friends over, they're gonna be having all these celebrations, they're gonna have an amazing time. I'm just thinking I'm gonna sit in my room, play video games until I get bored, and try my best not to be noticed. Mm-hmm. Which leads me to another area. Another place of dread that came as a result of me being at home for so long was the fact that I would be with my family for as long as I would, which I don't have an amazing relationship with my family. Even now, as things have very slowly started to get better, it certainly wasn't nearly like this while I was living with them. My father was really verbally abusive and in some cases physically abusive, and my mom was far less so, but it was very difficult for her to stand up to my dad, especially when sometimes he would level some of those things at her. And so most of those 2 weeks would end up just me and my brother trying to like hide in our rooms, try to avoid being noticed, and like do our best to spend time with our friends online and like over text and over like quiet voice calls at night, and try and make the best of a bad situation.
I feel that. I really feel that. This topic is not necessarily an isolated topic for even myself. The holidays were not always easy in my family either. I also came from a family that had abuse sprinkled in it, and there was a lot of alcoholism and things like that. So, even in my house, I'd watch all my friends have these amazing like family parties, and people would go see their family and things like that. And I always knew that, for us, like for me and my brother, a holiday meal was going to end in some sort of drunken fight. And it would be ruined, and we'd be all sad, and we'd just go up to our rooms and just kind of do what we needed to do to like just get away from it. So I feel that it's not, and I think that's why it's really important to talk about this, because I don't think we talk about it. I don't think we really say, we just assume that everyone is going home to a really nice family and, is having a good time, but that's not always the case. So I think it's good that we kind of throw this out there and just kind of be like, hey, just a reminder, like.
Sometimes it's not amazing.
Yeah.
Whenever, like, in class, especially in elementary and middle school, whenever I would have teachers who would be like, so tell us about your holiday plans, I would be the one who would, like, chuckle and, like, try and play it off like I'm saying a joke. Like, well, I'm just gonna sit in my room quietly and play video games. And everyone would laugh and be like, ha ha ha, that's very funny. It really wasn't. There was always that feeling of I'm the one who's always going to bring down the mood because everyone else has these amazing holiday celebrations. And like, for me, it's just the moment I step off my school bus, like December 22nd, I'm just waiting to get back on it next year.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. It's not necessarily, I mean, I guess we could look at it as like, that's a good thing that this isn't a common situation. But it is hard. It can be hurtful if it's not thought about at all. So, I'm aware of your winter break plans. But would you mind sharing your story about your plans for winter break?
Okay. Well, Kutztown has given me, as I'm a first semester freshman, I've never been in college before. But Kutztown has given me an incredible sense of freedom and like the ability to just operate as an independent person without needing to worry about like my family being there, judging me, anything like that. So it's a sense of freedom that I frankly don't plan on giving up anytime soon. So I talked to housing, and I decided that I was going to stay over for all of these breaks within the school year, and that now most recently includes winter break. And so I talked to housing, I fill out a form, I think it's about $600. And so for those $600, I'll be staying in my currently assigned dorm room all through winter break. That sounds really lonely, and admittedly, I was worried it was going to be. Frankly, I was worried I was going to go stir crazy, being quote unquote all by myself for 35 days. But I don't think I'm going to be. I don't think that's a concern, because I thankfully have so many friends, and I have honestly who I consider a new family here at Kutztown among my fellow students, both undergrads and grad students. Especially from the center, but not exclusively from the center. And they're like, we live in town, or we can drive. We're willing to come up to meet you. So I don't think I'm going to be all by myself in the slightest. I'd be crazy if I said that there's never going to be a day where I'm just completely by myself doing nothing but my winter course classwork. But that's certainly not going to be all of it. And I honestly don't even know if that kind of day is going to be most of it.
Well, actually, we're going to circle back to that sense of support and community that you just kind of talked about. But I am interested in knowing more, how did you come to that decision of staying here for winter break? Why did you choose not to go home?
It was that sense of it was the sense that I felt like I belonged here in KU. In a positive sense, and also in the mirror opposite of that is I could never go back to my house. Even now, my household isn't the healthiest environment, and I just don't want to go back there and have to suddenly feel like I'm back in that negative environment, in that really damaging place for me. That wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my mental health. To put it lightly, wasn't good for my physical health sometimes. And I couldn't. It sounds a little overdramatic, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't be re-subjected to that kind of environment when I've known the freedom and independence that I have here at Kutztown.
So that's the really cool thing about going off to college, is that you do get to create your own sense of community, and you do get to create your own sense of independence. And that's literally it was kind of how it was for me when I came to college. But I definitely know that sense of not wanting to go home, because you know what's waiting for you at the door. Ultimately, you know that your family is going to just not get it and just not support you in the ways that you need to be supported right now. And so I think it's awesome that you recognize that and you did what you needed to do to get the money to be able to stay here and just not put yourself in that situation, because there is a lot of students that do go home for the winter break that do subject themselves to being misgendered, being, just ignored, just being just swept under the rug, just being invalidated. And that's not fair, because those are supposed to be your parents. These are people that are supposed to care for you and love you and, do anything for you, regardless, unconditionally. Granted, I don't know what I would imagine. This is coming from my end of this, of assuming that goes across cultures. But it's always such a shock for me when someone's like, yeah, my parents don't accept my identity. I'm like, what? Excuse me? Why? That's your child in front of you.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable. It's always been very much a feeling of, we don't talk about this. I recently came out to my parents, and even now I still don't feel safe in that household, even though that my mom has 100% consistently misgendered me and kind of said I was crazy. But she's not furious, but there was very much an impression of you're not really our kid. Or my mom in multiple cases would say that if you're if you're gay, you're quote unquote cursed by God. And if you're trans, you're deeply, deeply mentally ill. Well, neither of which are true in the slightest, but those two together very much created an environment of, I absolutely can never come out. I've known I was trans since I was, I want to say 12 or 13, and I've known I was pansexual since around then as well. And both of those I've had to keep very much under the rug and, like, not talk about it openly at all. Because if I did, I was very much under the impression that, like, at best, my life would be even more hell than it already was. And at worst, I would be, like, put into the foster system. And, like, I personally had friends who've been through that, and I didn't want to put myself through that. So there was very much an impression of just keep it all locked up, don't talk about it, just deal. And that was my only option, it felt like.
And then you came to Kutztown, and you got to unlock all of it.
Yeah.
You got to be who you want to be. I remember
Absolutely.
meeting you for the first time, and I was just so excited for you, because it really, very early on into the semester, I could tell that you were already making a home for yourself here, and that you were finding that sense of community, and that you were actually allowing yourself to take up space, and you're allowing yourself to be who you are truly. And
Absolutely.
so, on that side, that's very positive and that's amazing, but then that comes with a cost, and that always comes with a consequence. And unfortunately, if it, in a perfect world, it would not. But, it's kind of like, for so long, you decided, you made that decision. You're like, I'm just going to keep this bottled up. I'm going to lock this away, and I will deal with this when I can. And now we're here, and it's kind of like, well, I'm definitely not going back now. Like,
Yeah.
now that you have that option, it's,
It felt like the John Mulaney bit where he's like, I'm gonna keep all my queerness in here, and then one day I'll leave. Because I feel so amazing here at Kutztown, and like I know that there are some people that it's a feeling of like almost shell shock, that like how incredibly accepting KU is. And thankfully, honestly, for me, there wasn't really that. I came into KU because at school I wasn't openly trans, but I was very openly pan. And I was very lucky to have a really large GSA. Our GSA actually got kicked out of the classroom it was in because that classroom, like the fire marshal reported us. We were reported to the fire marshal. It could only hold 30 people, and we had over 100 people in our GSA.
Wait, I'm going to pause you right there. For anyone that doesn't know what a GSA is, what is it?
Oh, a GSA is a gay-straight alliance.
There you go. So it's like kind of like how we have allies here at Kutztown. It's just a club or organization that just deals with the LGBTQ community plus allies and things like that. So yeah, it's like the high school or like public school system version of an allies club.
Yeah, and I was kind of used to, and I was really enjoying, even while I was at school. It always hurt having to get on the bus and like, well, this all goes back in the closet. But I was already kind of used to having a community that knows who I am and accepts who I am, and like understood and accepted me completely. So once I was at KU, it was euphoric. It was like, this is who I am, and I can do this 24/7. There would be like, I won't lie, there would be like times in the dead of night where I'm just staring at my ceiling, like a wave of dread is like, when is this gonna stop? And then it takes me a little bit sometimes, but I do always end up reminding myself, it's never gonna stop. This is who I am now, and I'm never gonna be put back in an environment where I again have to bury who I am, or like I have to be uncomfortable with, or I have to be secretive about who I am as a person. I'm never gonna be in that environment again. And I just love it at KU because of that.
That's awesome. That makes my heart happy that like you get to fully experience that. We're going to take a break, but after the break, I do want to talk about the support system and kind of what that looks like. I have with me Alyssa, who is a trans woman, and she is sharing her story about not going home for Christmas and how that's kind of been, kind of what has led up to that point and what that's looked like for her. And just kind of how the holidays is just not a good time for people. But now we're going to kind of focus it into more of a positive aspect, and we're going to talk more about community and like how to find that sense of family during the holidays and things like that. And earlier, Alyssa had mentioned to me that she grew up in a Muslim household and that, they didn't celebrate Christmas. And so I'm actually really curious to know if you plan to celebrate Christmas now that you're on your own and you get to create your own traditions and things like that.
I personally, I don't think I'm I'm not 100% religious per se. I'm a very spiritual person. But yes, absolutely. I am 100% intent on celebrating Christmas. I know that I said that I would be I'd be like on campus by myself, but like I intend on spending as much time with my friends around town and like who would be willing to stop on by, as much time with them as possible. Because for me, Christmas, even just looking at it as an outside observer for most of my life, and now this being the first Christmas I'm able to experience hands-on personally, it's a celebration of like warmth and light and family and food over like the darkest and coldest part of winter. And it's on December 25th. It's like a reminder that now you've been through the worst of it. The days are going to start getting longer again. It's going to, this is as bad as it's going to get. And with all that family and friends and, community all around you, if this is as bad as it's going to get, I think that it's sort of symbolic of you're looking forward to a really good year and, a really good winter afterwards.
I think this also makes a really good point about how family is not always biological, and that family can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and that, your friends are still your family. Anyone that, just because they're not biologically related to you does not mean that they can't mean family to you. My best friend, who I've been best friends with for 10 years, I would 100% consider my sister. She has been such a big support system for me throughout everything. And someone had mentioned to me, actually, that they go to their aunt's house for, the holidays. But they're not actually their aunt. It's just their mom's best friend. And they just visit them. But, they were raised to think that they were their aunt. And I was like, wait, that's actually something that I see myself doing with my best friend. Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to also, recognize that, family doesn't have to be just your parents. It can be anybody. So, before I ask that question, what's been your favorite, Christmas thing so far?
Run that question by me again. How do you mean?
So now that you're able to kind of celebrate Christmas and fully love it and not have to just package it away anymore, what's been your favorite part about the Christmas season and all of that? And is there maybe a Christmas tradition that you're interested in starting or things like that? Or do you like Christmas lights? Do you love trees? Do you like snowflakes?
For me, I always loved the gift giving aspect of it. It was always real. I've received gifts from my friends in the past, even in elementary school. They were small and I'd have to hide them. And months later, my parents are like, "Where did this come from?" I have no idea. I certainly didn't get it as a Christmas gift. But this year, I've really enjoyed receiving gifts from my friends, and I have some friends that no spoilers. I want to make or give them gifts that I feel would really mean a lot to them, and it's something that I really want to take part of. It makes people really happy to see that here's a way that they can express how much they care about you, and something that's really meaningful to them. And that's something I really want to get into, and I want to start this year and my years to follow.
I feel that's so hard. I love gift giving. I go all out for gifts. And people know this about me. They know that I like get crazy with it. So, yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite parts. And it's not even like, it's not the materialistic part of it. It's not the actual like physical gift that means a lot to me. It's this idea of putting thought into a little package that this would be perfect for this person, and seeing that person open it and like see their face and see how happy they are. That's always been my favorite part.
Right.
So I feel that. So, like, how do you find that, like, when you kind of have to, like, 86, you know, the actual biological family, how do you find that family?
Honestly, this is going to sound a little weird, but, like, the line between my friends and family has gotten a little blurry, honestly. Especially when you're a queer person, and as deeply queer as I am, like being a pansexual trans woman, you begin to realize that like there's this sense of like there's like this duality of like struggle and accomplishment. Like every struggle that you have to go through and every fight that you win and come out stronger and better, that sort of unifies, I feel, a lot of the queer community. And a lot of my friends on campus are queer, and I feel like they're family at this point, just because even in the past few months, even like since I've been here, we've all been through like a lot of struggles, and we've been through a lot of amazing times, and we've shared them with each other. And I feel like it's that feeling of like being like bonded together through through the good times and the bad. I feel like that sort of has been really the defining characteristic of family for me. Family at Kutztown has been like people that no matter what happens, I immediately know that like these people are the closest to me in the world. I can talk to them about anything, and they'll understand, and they'll listen, and they'll be there for me. Whether it's the best thing in the world or the worst, I know that I can come to them, and I feel like that's what has defined family for me so far.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that kind of just really reiterates the point that I made earlier that was like, family's not always relatives. It's not always blood. It's not always biological. I think like I said, we forget that. Like, I don't know why we get so caught up on this sense of loyalty to our family when if your biological family has not done anything to better you and has not done anything to keep you safe and to provide an adequate or a strong place to grow and develop into, why do we have to hold on to them? Why does that have to triumph over everyone else in your life? I used to always get so much pushback from my family if I'd want to go spend, more from my mom than anything. Partly I think that would just come from a place of her just wanting to see me and want to spend time with me. I'd always get pushback on wanting to go spend holidays with significant others. But there comes a time where there's going to be other people that really matter in your life, and you will also want to spend those times with them too. So, there's always that struggle of picking almost, I guess.
Right. How do I want to say this? I guess there's been that feeling for me with my family of I'm sorry. It's sort of a feeling of I feel more connected to my family here at Kutztown, and I feel a lot of people, they get really wrapped up in you came from your parents, so you have to love them no matter what. You have to support them no matter what. But this isn't maybe the most positive way of saying it, but I don't owe them anything because they brought me here. And if my relationship with my parents hasn't been supportive, if my relationship with my parents has felt antagonistic, and especially I've noticed in my parents, in my mom more than anything, if they don't realize that I'm their kid and not an imagined idea of me, a version of me that they've made up in their head, if they don't understand that I'm their kid and not that idealized version of me, then I feel like they don't even think of me as family. They think of this other version of me that's like, that's cis, that's straight, that's a good Muslim, etc. That they don't want to be associated with who I really am. And I feel like that's another thing that's been a defining difference. That I feel like for me, family is people who accept you for who you are no matter what. And I felt that infinitely more with my friends in Kutztown than I ever have with like my biological relatives.
There's always this like sense of, well, they're your parents kind of deal, like, and it's like, okay, and like, what about it? Have you gotten that kind of response from anyone? Like that sense of like when you tell them like, oh, I'm not like going home, or like if you share that you don't really, you kind of cut your family off kind of deal. Have you gotten that response of like, well, they're your parents, like how could you do that kind of deal?
Absolutely. There have definitely been people in my life that they were fairly sympathetic, but that they would still backhand me with, but they're still your parents. You can't treat them like this. You have to, when I'm like, I want to separate myself from them, they're like, you can't treat them like this. You got to be better than that. They're still your family. You have to stick through it because they would do anything for an imaginary version of me. So I should do anything for them. And I don't agree with that because, like, frankly, they haven't treated me with a whole lot of respect. Love, arguably, in a weird funhouse mirror version of it, they haven't treated me with a whole lot of respect. And my relationship with my biological parents has never been amazing. And so I feel the farthest thing in the world from, but they're your parents, you have to. I feel the farthest thing in the world from that.
I definitely think that with the Millennial Generation, which I'm a part of, and, you know, people, I feel like, aren't just not, anyone that has not come from our generation, like has come from older generations, was taught this idea that you are loyal to your family, regardless of how much pain and suffering they cause. And that, you know, regardless of the damage that they do, you show up for them at the end of the day. And I really think it's important to recognize this shift in the millennial generation where we're like, no, like, just because you did X, Y, Z, I didn't ask you to do that. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to be raised in this family. I didn't do any of that. So why am I still expected to fulfill these various roles, per se, like, for a lack of a better word, I guess. And so I think it's important that we don't shame people into thinking that they have to be loyal to family, regardless of the damage that they do. And so it's good that you already understand that you don't have to placate that imaginary version that they've created.
Yeah. And in my experience, and like from talking to my friends, I think that it's very much a feeling of, I think this is my personal theory, older generations really only ever had themselves. A lot of people in older generations, they, like a lot of women in older generations maybe didn't go to college. A lot of people of color weren't able to go to college. You weren't able to go to college. The internet wasn't a thing. Like queerness and communities of color weren't as founded and as like international as they are now. Like, I feel connected with people all over the world. I feel connected with people I've never met before. And like, I feel 50, 60 years ago, that wasn't the case. Like, your community was your hometown and your family. And my personal theory is that a lot of people in older generations feel that family is all you have. Maybe not because they didn't endure the same things that we have, but because they would look around. Maybe, honestly, because I think that there have been people who they would look around and be like, if I reject these people as my family, I have no one. There was no internet back then. There was no, like, not everyone went to, like, 4 years of college. Not everyone went to, like, you know? I feel that there was very much a sense of, that I have no other community to call my family if I reject these people. So no matter what, I have to make it work.
That's a great theory. I've never thought of it like that. And I think it's very valid to recognize that the times are different. Back then there was not an internet, and that you didn't instant message people and you didn't text people. You literally physically went over to their house, and like you had to use like the actual mail to communicate, and like things that we've never thought about because we did not grow up in those situations. And I think it's important to recognize that the times are different because, I've said this in other shows, like it doesn't make sense. How do I want to put this? Kind of like how the feminist movement has moved. It's shifted. It's changing, and it should change because the times are changing. The times are different. Of course, feminism was predominantly white and XYZ at one point because that's what was happening at that time. That's what needed to have happened, but it makes more sense for it to now be intersectional and for more people to be at the table when we're talking about these issues, because more people are being represented and there should be more representation. So I hope that made sense.
I think it did.
Okay, good.
That like we have larger communities now. Because like you're a millennial, I'm Gen Z. We live in a time where we're more interconnected with the larger world than any generation before us. Like our parents, our grandparents, they didn't have like access to Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat all their lives. They honestly, maybe it was a foreign concept to them that was introduced in like the middle of their lives. The fact that like you can be integrated into huge communities of people who are like you, people who might be related to you, and people who like maybe could have no real relation to you other than like a shared cause, a shared idea, that kind of thing.
I remember when the internet came about and my parents were like so just resistant to it. They just like didn't understand. But then they eventually got on board. Like now my dad only orders from Amazon Prime, so that's a thing. So one of the last things I want to talk about is, what do you want your friends and or anyone else in your life to know and understand about how home life and how going home isn't easy, and that, I'll even follow it up with, what does that support look like? Like, how do you support these people in your lives? If you know someone that, if you know another trans person that isn't going home for the holidays, like how do you support them? What does that look like?
This is going to sound a little weird, but for me personally, at least, and I don't know if I speak for the entire trans community, the entire queer community, but for me personally, it's been a lot of, I've been going through the motions for so long, having people tell me what to do, having people sort of make decisions in my life for me, and me not having the ability to make those decisions for myself. And for me, there's honestly a feeling of like, I want support. I don't want hand-holding, I want to know that I have friends and I have loved ones waiting in the wings for me, that if I ever need support, if I ever need help, that they'll be able to be there for me, and that they'll be able to support me, and that I can trust them with maybe situations that I can't handle by myself. The one thing that I feel like maybe doesn't get talked about as much is that I want to feel independent. I have spent so much of my life, and a lot of queer people have spent so much of their lives being told things about themselves, being told how the world is and how we need to live our lives. And I just think that needs to stop. I think that, like, I'm in a point in my life, I'm in a juncture in my life. I know I only turned 18 this year, but, like, I want my independence. I want to know that while I have the support and I have the well wishes and I have the advice and guidance of my friends, I want to know that, like, ultimately in the end, they trust me. They trust me as an adult woman, as an adult trans queer woman, that I know myself and I know how to make these decisions for myself, and that in the end, I'm the one who calls the shots. And I feel like every queer person should have that ability to know that in their lives, I know that my queer friends as well, they feel similarly, that we just want that feeling of independence.
Mm-hmm.
We want support. We want to know that you're there for us, but we also want to know that you won't try to take the wheel and that you're going to let us do our own thing, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm. You, I feel like, just definitely spoke to this concept of autonomy and giving someone the power and the autonomy back. But I think we tend to think of those concepts in abusive relationships and not this kind of context. And I think it's important to equate this context to those terms as well. Like, it is important to give someone the mic when they are in the room. If they're not in the room and you're trying to speak for an individual, that's one thing. As long as you have their permission, by the way, that's another thing. But if someone's in the room that can speak for an experience, pass that mic over. Like, be like, oh, I don't have to talk about this anymore because the person that has the most experience and the most knowledge is now in this room, so they can like talk about that. One of the things that I found even in my relationship with my partner who is trans, and for the record, he's always given me permission to mention that he is trans and to, out him per se. He always talked about that. He always talked about for a really long time. When he lived at his parents' house, just was always told what to do, how to be, what he needed to be, who he was supposed to be. And he eventually got out on his own, and he actually kind of struggled with that sense of freedom, that sense of, how do I do this on my own? But I think you also make a really good point that you have that support for those moments that maybe you're like, well, actually, I don't know what I'm doing. So I think that's really important. I 100% think you're right in that we do need to talk about that. We need to talk about the fact that people can make their own decisions. They can be their own person, and not to assume that. So
yeah. I just personally, I personally have a lot of friends in the Kutztown GLBT Center, and I feel like, not to go super off track, but like a lot of my older friends there, like grad assistants, just older undergrads, that I feel like I've gained a lot from their experience, and I've gained a lot from, like, you're a queer person living like 4 or 5 or 6 years like older than me. You've lived through more. You know how the world works better than I do. But in the end, they've always deferred to me and been like, well, here's my experience. Here's what I know. You do with this information what you will, because we trust your judgment.
Well, and your experience is going to be completely different, too, because you are a separate human being. And that's important to take in consideration. And that I think people sometimes will offer advice and suggestions as if we asked for it, when we didn't ask for it. And it's like, we didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
If I wanted it, would have asked for it. So I think that's also important to keep in mind, that, wait for the people in your life to ask you for those things, and trust that if they do need help, that they will come for you for help and things like that. Is there any last, like, tidbits that you want to share, or any like anything else you want your friends or anyone else listening to understand about this topic today?
I guess I wanted to say that, like, what I feel is really important for myself to remember, and for like any other queer listeners who might be going through like the same struggles, that like, as long as I'm breathing, there's nothing that's going to really stop me. Like, I've been through 18 years of struggles, and I have come out on top every single time. And I think that's going to keep on happening. I'm going to continually be faced with struggles and with difficult situations, and they're not going to be easy. They're going to take time. They're going to take energy. Like me deciding to come here. Me, like, working up the nerve to ask my friends for support in, like, getting the money to live on campus. All of that. It's all hard, and none of it's easy, and none of that should be discounted or written off as, oh, but you did it, so it must be easy, or like, you did this once, you can do it again. But what matters to me is that I'm still breathing, and I still know that I want a better life for myself, and I want a better life for all of my queer friends and my queer community. I want a world where we don't have to struggle like this, but until then, until that ideal world is achieved, I know I do, and I know that all of my friends do, that we have that fight in us, that we can, whether it's over break, whether it's this winter, whether it's with our family, whether it's being accepted by society in general, that this isn't a struggle that you're going to win easily, but it's not one that you're going to lose unless you let yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to, honestly, that was a great way to end the show, just because it's positive, but at the same time, it's understanding that you are resilient and that these struggles are not discounted.